What's up, folks? Welcome back to the Whoop podcast, where we sit down with the best of the best. Whoop is on a mission to unlock human performance, and I'm your host, Will Ahmed, the founder and CEO of Whoop. This week's episode is a good one. We've got Whoop VP of Performance Science and Principal Scientist Kristen Holmes back again, and she's joined by author James Nestor. James is an international best-selling author and journalist known for his book, Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. This book is incredible. It sold over 2 million copies. Highly recommend it. And it's an instant bestseller in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, Sunday London Times, and more. So check that book out. That is Breath. Kristen and James discuss the research that inspired James' work for Breath. They talk about how you can pinpoint the moment in history when humans went away from proper breathing. I'm a big believer in breathwork, so this resonated for me. How breathing is linked to performance and good health. The negative effects of mouth breathing. How to get started with nasal breathing. Turns out a couple minutes each day can make a big difference. The importance of practicing the right breathing techniques for elite athletes. And the impact of breathing protocols on stress, weight loss, and your overall health. Turns out you can see an impact on your body in just 30 seconds with the right breathing protocols. If you're considering joining Whoop, now is a very unique time. You can sign up for Whoop literally with a free trial. So just come to our website, sign up for a free trial, get a Whoop in the mail, and you have 30 days to decide if you'd like to become a member. That's at whoop.com to get set up and start on your journey to higher performance. If you have a question you want to see answered on the podcast, email us podcast@whoop.com, call us 508-443-4952. Without further ado, here are Kristen Holmes and the breathing expert, James Nestor.
James, so great to have you here.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, you wrote just a sensational book entitled Breath, the New Science of Lost Art. And I think its contents, truly highlight how vital it is to breathe correctly, if indeed the goal is to unlock higher levels of health and fitness. So I'm so excited to kind of dig into everything that you learned in writing this book. But I'd love to start, if we can, just to take us through some of the research that really inspired you to go down what is truly just this insane rabbit hole of all things breath.
Mm-hmm. So, it depends on what angle of research. We could talk about anthropology, we could talk about CO2, we could talk about biochemistry or physiology, but which angle?
Maybe, let's start from just the evolutionary roots. How has our how has breathing, how have we evolved? And what did you find?
So humans used to be really good breathers. We know this because we're able to look at ancient skulls and look at their upper palates and able to look at their sinus cavities and able to look at how their mouths formed. And we looked very, very different than we look today. And where a lot of this change started occurring was around 300, 400 years ago when industrialized foods began flooding into cities and the countryside and more. And so all of those foods dramatically and immediately changed the way our faces looked and changed the way our airways functioned. So we can pinpoint the moment when we became the worst breathers in the whole animal kingdom. And I did not know this when I was first researching this book. So this was complete news to me. And the more I learned about it, the more impossible I thought it could be, because I had understood that evolution was something that took tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. But this change that occurred throughout countries, throughout continents, throughout generations happened just so quickly. And that was interesting to me. And it was also interesting to learn what a poor breather I have become because of that, and why we're all poor breathers because of that.
What did you notice about, as you started to learn about, how our kind of just the aesthetics have changed and the way we breathe change? What did you see in the research that started to link this to, performance and health?
Hmm.
Was
Well,
there anything that kind of stood out?
yeah, I started talking to the researchers who study this stuff and have been
Hmm.
studying it for decades and decades. And this is a little controversial, but I'm going to mention it anyway. They began showing me pictures of sports stars, and they began showing me pictures of their faces. And I said, "Why are you showing me these faces of these sports stars?" And they said, "Do you see anything that all of them seem to have in common? Not all of them, but most of them." And they have these very wide faces. They have these prognathic, outward growing faces. They're able to breathe really well. And if you are not able to breathe really well, you are struggling to get energy. We get most of our energy
Mm.
through our breath, not through what we eat and what we drink. Most of the energy comes from breathing. And if you're struggling to do that, you're never, ever really going to be able to perform at your top levels. So I started to see all of those connections between sports stars and their level of performance and their facial growth and their facial shape.
Hmm.
And then you start to see other people around the street who don't have that facial shape, who are struggling to breathe. So, this is it. Breathing is not just a conscious act, it is also tied to our skeletal development. And it's tied to so many other things of how we're able to do it and what level we're able to really access that breath and use it.
Where do we go wrong in the developmental process? So I assume, we come out of the womb, and I would imagine our default is we probably breathe perfectly, right? Like at what point do we go awry, or is that not the case?
Well, I think nowadays we go wrong in every possible direction. We go wrong,
Mm.
which is why indigenous populations don't need breath coaching, right? They don't need to be told to walk 10,000 steps a day or to
Mm.
eat the right food or have a lot of
Yeah,
fiber or get vitamin D through sun exposure. So it's just a disaster
just
what's happened
modernity.
in modern life. I love
Yeah.
living in a climate controlled place. I'm a big fan of, a lot of the mod cons, but at the same time, we paid a very severe price because of this. And breathing is just one of them. So you mentioned that when we come out of the womb, we're good to go. But not the case now. We used to be.
Wow.
Hundreds and hundreds of years ago, we used to be completely good to go. And if you weren't going to survive, right? But
Hmm.
nowadays, because mothers are such poor breathers, they're passing this on to their kids. So we can actually see in the womb, we can look at a fetus right now and see how apt this fetus is going to be to suffer from snoring and sleep apnea later on in life because our faces are changing before we're even born. And this wasn't the case before. I looked at a lot of fetal skulls from the past, and they look like completely different animals. So just because we're at a disadvantage right when we get going doesn't mean we can't
Mm.
fix this. And that was the real driver behind this book and this research. It's like, okay, here's the core issue. What do we
Mm.
do to really fix it? Not just the band-aid, but to fix that core problem.
I mean, I can't imagine that practitioners, doctors, when you think about sleep problems and anxiety and, performance issues, or, just the desire to lose weight and build muscle, like, is anyone asking, well, how do you breathe?
No,
I feel like that conversation really isn't happening. So what
no.
should that conversation, understanding you're not a medical doctor, but, what did you uncover? Like, what does this conversation actually need to look like if we're to get to, seems to me that how we breathe is kind of
Mhm.
root cause here.
No one's having that conversation. You're right. There's
Mm.
doctors in my family. My father-in-law is a pulmonologist. He's been a pulmonologist for 40 something years. Most of my
Hmm.
friends, half of them are doctors. So we talk about this stuff all the time. And you're right. No one's talking about it, especially with young kids, which is an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
If you have a kid that snores or has sleep apnea, this is not cute. It's destroying their health. It's inhibiting their
Yeah.
growth. It's inhibiting their neurodevelopment. It's inhibiting so many other problems. So this
Hmm.
is something that I was shocked by how few people were even diagnosing it and how fewer people were treating any of these
Hmm.
problems. And some of the treatments they were using were actually making the breathing worse and making these kids worse. Like sleeping pills make your breathing worse at night.
Oh,
So if your
yeah.
breathing is a problem at night, and that's the root issue behind so many of your chronic issues, then you have to fix that. So the answer is not a lot of people are looking at it. It's dentists are actually becoming the breathing people. I've been talking at a lot of dental conferences. You think that when you write a book about
Wow.
breathing that you're not going to be talking to dentists, but they're the only ones taking charge of this because they're the ones who spend the most time in patients' mouths, and they see the same patterns over and over and over. So there's hope in that. And I think
Yes.
that whole field of dentistry is changing because no one else is taking this up. Your family physician very likely isn't going to be assessing your adenoids or tonsils or airway
Mm.
or snoring or sleep apnea. They don't have time to do it. And I'm not pointing fingers at doctors. They don't
Mm.
have time to do this. You're seeing 20 patients in an hour. You can't show
Right.
them breath work, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. My son suffered from pretty bad allergies. It just a stuffy nose, chronic stuffy nose, and just a lot of sneezing. It didn't appear to be allergic to anything specific. I read a book in 2015, The Oxygen Advantage, Dr.
Hmm.
Patrick McEwen, and
Hmm.
started taping his mouth. And sure enough, he has really no allergies. I found this really interesting. Is this something that you found in your research? Is there, what is the connection there between just asthma, allergies, and breathing?
Yeah, I'm nodding because I hear this every single day,
Yes.
and I've heard it every single day I mean, people say I've gotten thousands of letters,
Wow.
and every talk I do, people come up. Some of them are laughing, some of them are crying,
Yeah.
because people are so frustrated that they're not being taken care of
Mhm.
properly, or they're getting the wrong advice. So
Yeah.
you're smart enough to go out and diagnose the issue and try things out, and look what happens.
Mm,
It works, and it's free.
totally.
Just to be clear, is like not all allergies are caused
Mm,
by mouth breathing, right? Some people have dairy intolerance.
mhm,
That's a big one. Sometimes it's pets or
mhm,
other things, but you can only benefit from breathing in and out of your nose. And sometimes that benefit is very small, and sometimes it can change your life. And this is what I keep hearing over and over again, and especially at night. So, how we breathe at night is setting us up for the next day. And people say, oh, breath is breath. I'm just getting air in, I'm getting air out. That's just 100% wrong. And your son is living proof of this.
mm,
How you're breathing at night is going to dictate your stress levels. It could help control your blood sugar. It can help control your cortisol. It can allow you to get into deeper, more restorative stages of sleep. I
mhm,
mean, on and on and on. Because if you're struggling to do anything at the time when we're supposed to be resting and restoring, everything's going to go off the rails.
yeah,
And our bodies are really good at compensating. So they can compensate for a while, maybe months, maybe even years. And eventually things are just going to break down.
mm,
So this often happens with kids with ADHD,
mhm,
with learning difficulties, with growth problems, with wetting their beds. They're in their teenage years. They're wetting their beds. They can't sleep at anyone else's house. I mean, I've
mm,
heard these dozens and dozens of times, and no one is looking at their breathing. So, specifically, this sleep tape, I'll get off my soapbox here and talk about some pragmatics. So, let's talk about sleep tape. So, about 65% of the population breathes with an open mouth when they're sleeping. So, not everyone needs sleep tape. So, when you hear these people saying everyone's going to benefit from it, that 35% isn't, because they're already closing their mouth. So,
mhm,
the first thing you have to do is, are you a mouth breather at night? There's a pretty good chance you are. Do you wake up with a very dry and pasty mouth? Are you drinking
mhm,
water throughout the night? Do you get a lot of cavities?
mhm,
The number one cause of cavities, I heard from dentists, isn't sugar, it's mouth breathing.
mm,
So if all of those things are happening, there's a good chance you are sleeping with an open mouth. For those people, sleep tape appears to be beneficial, but you have to start in slow. Start by wearing a little piece of tape for 10 minutes in front of your computer answering boring emails, then do 20 minutes the next day, 30 minutes. You get where I'm going. So
mhm,
after about a week, are you comfortable enough? Have you watched TV laying down? Have you
mhm,
taken a nap wearing sleep tape? Try it at night. Is it right for you? Only you can decide that.
mm,
So don't listen to anyone else. Listen to your own body. But the sleep tape thing, it just keeps going. I just keep hearing about it,
Yeah.
and people send me their sleep scores all the time, and it's doing something.
Yeah.
It completely transformed my sleep and really helped to transform my health. And again, this is a free and easy thing. Is it right for everyone? No. Is it right for you?
Mhm.
Find out.
Yeah, over the years, I mean, I've been with Whoop now for almost 7 years, and of course, we collect a whole bunch of, we
Mhm.
collect lots of heart rate data, and we stage sleep, and there's no question that when folks begin consciously being more conscious of nose breathing instead of mouth breathing and incorporating uh, taping at night, we see huge improvements in the restorative sleep. We see massive decreases in sleep disturbances, and it's funny, like when I work, I used to work a lot more with teams. But that was always the first place when I would see a lot of disturbances with athletes. Sure enough, they'd have a
Mhm.
deviated septum, or
Mhm.
or they'd have problems with asthma. But it always would kind of go back to sleep. I have lots of examples of athletes who literally would take a redshirt year just to correct their deviated septum, and they would come back
Mhm.
just levels above where they're at. I mean, they're already elite, playing in some of the top collegiate programs, and they'd come back at even a higher level. So it's really interesting to see the performance gains for sure that can happen once
Mhm.
corrected, but just the overall quality of life. And maybe if you want to talk about a couple stories, just you're at these
Mhm.
conferences, you're speaking, you're getting tons of letters. What have been some of the really kind of I guess heartwarming moments that were maybe surprising to you, just the benefits of the knowledge that you're putting out there and people adopting these kind of new way of living.
Well, one of them really echoes your experience. A lot of people, frustrated parents, are writing about their kids,
Mm.
and so this dad sent me the sleep data from his kid. No one had ever talked about his kid's breathing. He has learning
Oh,
difficult. I mean, everything. His growth was stunted. ADHD, couldn't sleep at night, wetting his bed,
ugh.
asthma, allergies, on and on and on. He's been on fistfuls of different drugs for over years, something like 7 to 9 pills, just pumping this kid up.
Oh,
No one ever looked at his sleep. So his dad went in, recorded his sleep. It was a complete disaster. Convinced the kid to wear sleep tape. He didn't do the recommended. I'm going to try for 10 minutes. Just went full
just
bore into it.
yeah.
The next night, the kid, from snoring and sleep apnea and choking on himself all night to zero. The very next night, 2 weeks later, the vast majority of the issues were 100% gone. And the doctor, of course, would just say, "Oh, what a coincidence! Oh, that's strange. I guess you're doing something well." No interest in
Ugh.
looking at this connection between breathing and sleep quality. So the good news is that we have
Mm.
different sources and different ways of getting information now. So people who want to take charge of some aspects of their health can do that. And the other good news is all of these things we're talking about are free. They're available for everyone. Someone's going to try to monetize sleep tape, blah, blah, blah. You can buy that stuff. It has a fancy package. It works great. So does the stuff down at Walgreens. So
Yeah.
whatever works well for you. But it just comes down to awareness. It starts with awareness.
Mm.
And then there's a lot of people, they become aware, but they're just like, oh, I don't want to wear sleep at night. That's cool. I don't care what you do, but as long as you have a choice to know what is good and what is bad and
Mhm.
what may improve my health and the health of my family, then I think that's what counts.
What's missing out when we're breathing through our mouth and not through our nose? Like what's kind of happening physiologically that is kind of negative.
hmm So I think like a few mouth breaths. Some people become so obsessed with this, and I get those letters as well. I counted 5 mouth breaths today. Is that going to injure my health? I'm just like,
Yeah.
dear God. So I'm talking about the vast majority of the breaths you're taking, not all of them. I'm breathing through my mouth a bit here. I'm talking to you, right? Which is one of the reasons why when you're talking for 3 hours, it's so exhausting.
Yeah, totally.
When you laugh, you're breathing through your mouth. When you're doing some pranayama exercises, you're breathing through your mouth. If you get into zone 4 and zone 5, you can use
Uh-huh.
mouth breathing as another gear to
Uh-huh.
crank you up to
Uh-huh.
get more air. It's a wonderful thing. But for the vast majority of your breaths, when you're not working out, when you're not doing pranayama or kundalini or whatever, or laughing or talking. It should be in and out through the nose. And here's why. Because when we breathe air in and out through our nose, we are cleansing it, we're trapping that moisture, and we're conditioning it. And that's what you want. You don't want to expose your lungs to everything in the outdoor environment.
Mm.
If you live in a city like I do, that means allergens and pollens and smog and dust. And when you breathe through the mouth, your lung is basically an exterior organ. It's exposed to everything. And again, we're built to deal with this. We'll start coughing more and expunging some of that. But in the long run, it's going to wear us down. So the nose is our first line of defense against bacteria and viruses as well. And finally, I'll mention, because I know there's a bunch of high performance athletes out there, your nose is controlling the amount of air you can take in and take out.
Yeah.
And it does that for a reason, because that allows you to extract so much more oxygen when you have that buffer, that baffle. It creates that pressure in your lungs and allows you to more easily get more oxygen and maintain healthy levels of CO2, which allows for better blood flow. So this is not a hypothesis. It's not a theory. This is a fact that anyone who studied any level of this knows. And this is a fact that all of the other mammals certainly know, because check out a horse when it's sprinting, check out a cheetah when it's sprinting, check out a lion. I mean, they're all breathing through their noses. So, and we should be as well.
So how would you recommend someone start? So for example, if let's say, we've been closing our mouth consciously and using tape, throughout the day, and, we're sleeping with our mouth closed, and now we want to try to exercise with, breathing exclusively through our nose. What can someone expect when they start that journey? I know my own experience, your capacity reduces significantly and it's really humbling. But just maybe walk us through, like, what is that process? And if you can kind of ride it and really stick to nasal breathing, through interval training or, whatever type of training you're doing, weightlifting, what are the benefits that people can expect if they kind of ride it out?
Well, expect it to be miserable.
Yeah,
Expect your
so painful.
performance to go down. Expect to curse a lot at me and anyone else who has told you to do this. So what you need to do is to get rid of your Western mindset and not try to go out there and kick this thing's ass as you're used to doing with everything else, but go into this very, very slowly in a controlled and patient way, because that's how you're going to be able to diagnose if there's a larger structural issue in your nose that you will need to get fixed. For the vast majority of people, that is not the case. What they need to do is start to use their nose more and more and breathe in and out of your nose. So what I would do as far as the step-by-step instructions is I would start off when you're walking around the neighborhood, walking your dog, walking to work, walking through an airport. Breathe in for 4 steps, breathe out for 4 steps, and breathe in for 4 steps, out for 4 steps. Does that feel comfortable? Do you want to push it a little more? You can start extending it. Breathe in for 4 steps, breathe out for 6 steps. You see where I'm going with this? So you can start to extend that and to continue breathing in and out of your nose. Once you get more comfortable with that, you can start to incorporate that into your jogging. Start playing around with your breath just to that level of discomfort with your jogging in and out. And it should be, if you're going to extend anything, it should be the exhale you are extending. So you don't necessarily want to be extending how many steps you take on the inhale, but the exhale, because when you exhale, you are relaxing your body. I think you will be amazed, especially if you jog a lot, what a difference the cyclical, easy breathing will make. It also makes jogging a lot more fun because it gives you something to focus on and to do. So I would start with that. And if you were still having issues, if there is just an incredible amount of congestion in your nose after a few weeks of doing this, that's right, a few weeks of doing this, then there could be a structural problem. You may want to see an ENT and see if there's something that could be done about that. But otherwise, for most people, just using the nose and using it more often can help to open up all of those tissues and make you an obligate nasal breather.
Perfect. Okay. I guess I'd be interested, for elite level athletes, there's going to be uh, decreases in performance. So I guess I'm wondering, what are those trade-offs? Like, if I'm an athlete and I'm preparing for the World Cup, in 6 months, is it worth it to
Hmm.
me to kind of take a hit for 4 to 6 weeks as I'm trying to build my efficiency and become a better breather? What would you advise, I suppose, a kind of a high performance coach who's training an athlete or a team? Is it worth it to like really go down this rabbit hole in terms of the improvements that they might see, or is this really at the margins?
Everybody's different. So
Eh,
everyone breathes slightly differently and everyone has a slightly different breathing dysfunction. So some people can convert to nasal breathing pretty quickly
uh,
because they're already breathing the majority of their breaths in and out through their noses. If you've got someone who has just been jogging and running and performing obligate mouth breathing the whole time, this is going to take this person much longer. And you're right that performance is going to dip precipitously,
eh,
especially with someone who is an obligate mouth breather. But the more you try this, the more that you will notice that once you reach that very low dip of converting yourself to breathe and to react and
mhm.
respond in this completely different way, I have never heard of anyone whose performance did not only rebound, but also increase. Sometimes that increase was very small, sometimes it was profound.
Right.
So I'm not saying there isn't someone out there,
Mhm.
but from all the people that I've talked to and all the elite trainers that I know, which are several of them
Mhm.
who are training Olympians, I mean, top level people, they have never, ever heard of any of their athletes having a decrease in performance.
Eh,
And some of these people have just become monsters afterwards.
yeah.
Sometimes it takes a few months. If you're training for the World Cup in 6 months, and you've only been mouth breathing, probably not the right thing to do
Mhm.
at that time. Wait till you have that 3.5 years off, and
Yeah.
then convert then. And again, it's the benefits can be really profound. A lot of people may think, well, it's just breathing. How can I?
Mhm.
The whole point of performance, especially in competition, you have to be operating as efficiently as possible. So if you are wasting energy breathing too much, struggling too much, your competitor is going to get ahead of you. And
Mhm.
just imagine what you can do by conserving that energy and using the least amount of effort to do the most. Your performance is going to increase. And that's what we've been seeing time and time again.
I love it. Yeah, I spent a bulk of my life as an athlete and as a coach, so I'm used to trying to squeeze efficiencies out of
Ah,
performance. But I guess I wonder, you think about, we do a beep test, we do the various strength things, we test flexibility, we do all sorts of tests, but we actually test how efficient an athlete is in terms of their lung capacity and their oxygen and CO2 exchange? Like, would you recommend a bolt test, for example, for athletes? Like, what would be the best entry point for a team who's like, what, I want to figure out who are our breather, who are our great breathers, who aren't, and are there efficiencies that we can create with these athletes?
yeah, there isn't one prescribed list of things that you should look at. Lung
Mm,
capacity is important,
mm,
right? Of course it is, but it's also how you're using the lungs that you already have. So
mm.
you could use smaller lungs much more efficiently and have your breathing much more efficient and be a better of a performer and an athlete than someone with larger lungs. So it's not just that. There's so many things that go into that. I think CO2 is going to be huge.
Yeah.
I think looking at CO2 instead of oxygen, most people, unless you're chronically sick, have emphysema or long COVID or whatever, don't have oxygen problems. You have CO2 problems. You're
Um,
breathing way too much. So that one I think is going to be coming online and being used a lot more. And again, I want to be clear, like larger lungs are better, but it's not just the size that matters. It,
mm,
it really depends on how you're breathing. So to answer your question, it's a whole bunch of different things that you need to look at. What Patrick McEwen and a lot of other people do is they have people do a bolt score,
mm,
and it's basically a breath hold.
mhm,
So what you do is you Take an inhale in, just soft, not exaggerated. That's cheating. And then just calmly exhale to neutral. Don't push that air out. Hold your breath. How long can you hold your breath? So you're supposed to be able to comfortably hold your breath on that exhale to neutral to about 40 seconds.
Uh-huh.
And what we've seen consistently is the better you are an athlete, the more easily you can hold that breath
Mhm.
because your respiration is locked in, because you know your body is used to having that level of carbon dioxide in its bloodstream. And that CO2 is going to help open up blood vessels and help deliver more oxygen.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing that you can do. That's also free. That Bolt score. I think there's a lot of benefits in it, not just for athletes, but for asthmatics, panic
Yeah.
sufferers, and more.
Just as a baseline, right? It's blood oxygen level test, right?
Yeah.
Is the acronym.
Mhm.
Okay. And in basically less than 20 seconds, you're probably over breathing. What would be the
Room for
room
improvement, as we
for
would say
okay.
diplomatically.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to be you don't. And I know that everyone's going to just struggle to hold your breath. I should have mentioned this too. This is not holding your breath until your face is red and you are
So
struggling. This is the first
comfortably.
palpable need to breathe. So maybe you swallow,
Uh-huh.
right? Maybe your abs your diaphragm sort of moves up for a second. So whenever you feel that, you mentally mark it.
Uh,
And another thing I want to mention, this is not a one and done thing. What you have to, your body is changing all the time. After you eat, it's harder. If
mhm.
you have jet lag, it's harder. If you slept like crap, your Bolt score could be 15, right?
Uh,
So take these over the course of a week, take it a few times a day, and then look at that delta.
mm.
What is that average amount?
Have you worked at all with a marker called heart rate variability?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I figured. Yeah. Yeah. So it's it's a metric that we track on Whoop. Very good at
Of
measuring
course.
heart rate variability. And would you expect to see, my hypothesis is always when I see individuals with kind of a lower baseline heart rate variability, like I always am like, I wonder how you breathe. But would you expect to see kind of lower HRV? Um, would there be a relationship between one's HRV and how well they breathe?
100%
Mm,
there would be. And this
yeah.
is the thing that if you've got a real skeptic, someone who's just like, it's just breathing,
Mm.
don't worry about it. I think this is all BS. Hook them up to Whoop, have them breathe at the coherent breathing pattern, which is about 5 to 6 seconds in, 5 to 6 seconds out, 5 to 6 seconds in. That's all it is. And then look at the heart rate variability after 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think that you are going to see huge jumps in HRV. I've never seen someone's decrease.
Uh,
I've always seen it increase. And this is the thing where people are like, oh my God. Because a lot of people have said, oh, this breathing's a placebo effect, which is
uh-huh.
bizarre.
Mhm.
This is a biological function.
Right.
If you want data, go for it. Look at your HRV, look at your blood pressure,
Uh-huh.
look at other metrics, look at your sleep once you start breathing. If you don't believe anyone
Uh-huh.
else, listen to your own body.
What are the most efficacious? You just kind of outlined one. What are the most efficacious breathing, protocols or practices? I mean, one that I practice religiously is resonance frequency breathing.
Mhm.
I'd be curious to kind of get your thoughts in terms of, how do we train ourselves to be, the most effective, at breathing?
People always like they expect, since I've studied this stuff for so long, talked to so many people, they think it's like some mysterious, complicated secret
Mm.
that I'm going to let them in on. It's like, oh, this is what I learned in the caves of Tibet. I hate to burst everyone's bubble, but it's the simplest stuff that is
Yeah.
the most effective. And it's the most unsexy stuff
Uh-huh.
too. People like tend to want to feel like they need to go to Hawaii for a week to learn some fancy breath work to become a better breather. Sorry, it's about shutting your mouth at night.
Yeah.
It's about breathing in a slow, rhythmic manner throughout the day.
Mm.
It's about understanding your breathing when you are working out and using your breathing to shift gears,
Mm.
right? And knowing that mouth breathing when you're working out really intense levels can be a wonderful benefit to your body and your brain as long as you shift it back down. So those simple things that we talked about are the most powerful. You have to become a normal breather before you're going to become a great breather.
Uh,
And normal breathing is the majority of the breaths in and out through the mouth. It's not snoring. It's not sleep apnea. So once you get all of that very uninteresting stuff out of the way, then you can start playing with stuff. So resonance frequency breathing, coherent breathing, whatever the hell you want to call it. Inhale to the point for about 5 to 6 seconds in, 5 to 6 seconds out. For people who are taller, over 6 feet, I learned this from a doctor, relatively new information, should be breathing even slower. So you should be extending that to around 8 seconds in, 8 seconds out. Larger lungs, larger diaphragm. And I'm 6'2", so I've noticed that slower breath with my HRV goes way up. You can still get benefits from the 5 to 6, so that's a good spot to start. Kids, they need to breathe more, so you could start them at 3 or 4, right? And so you just start at a place where you're comfortable, then you can start working it up. So that's a very powerful tool. Something else that I use all the time, use it a few times today, especially when things get spicy and frustrating, is take 2 breaths. So 1 breath in, hold for 3, another breath on top of that breath, extending the chest out. And you just let it fall out to neutral. So we're going to try that again, everybody. 1 breath in. Hold to 3, 2, 3. Another breath in. And just let it fall out. So I do that about, see, I can just feel it right there. Do that
so
about 3 or 4 times when you are really stressed out. When something is really aggravating, when you're putting in your password and they've changed the password and you have to upload all that crap that we have to deal with every day, that's very effective for me, maybe for you as well. And then to go into that resonant frequency, that coherent breathing pattern. So once you've got those easy ones down, and once you're a normal breather, then I think you can start experiencing all of the really weird stuff. And you're going to get most benefits with these long breath work sessions once you know how to breathe properly. I can't tell you how many people I see in breath work, or they're dysfunctional breathers. They're getting some out of it, but I'm like, my God, you could, if you actually open up your lungs, if you had the right biomechanics here, you'd be able to really be able to push this into some interesting ways. So that's what I would do. That's my blanket prescription for people who want to get into better breathing.
Yeah, that's beautiful advice. I definitely am a firm believer to get the foundation right first. And if you don't, you're just building inefficiency on top of inefficiency, and no one wants to do that. So talk maybe a little bit about, so that you talked about the kind of the calming and relaxation type of breath work. What about a tumo type of breathing? This really cyclic hyperventilation type of breathing. What kind of place does that have in, just the spectrum of all things kind of breath work and breathing and breathing optimization?
This was something that really confused me, because I learned from people like Patrick, who were just like, it's slow, low through the nose, all the time. You want to be chilled. And yet we know the science is very clear. There's so many benefits to vigorous pranayamas, vigorous kriyas, tumo breathing, Wim Hof breathing. They're all doing the same thing, right? So it doesn't have to be this thing or that thing. And that's what frustrates me about the breathwork community. Some people glom on to just one specific thing, but breathing is vast. We can do it in a bunch of different ways. It's been interesting to see Patrick sort of changing his views on this and seeing the benefits of these hyperventilation techniques. So what these do is they're done for a short amount of time, and they're extremely stressful. And you may be thinking, well, why do I want to be stressed out? Like, I'm stressed out throughout the rest of the day. What you're dealing with through the rest of the day is this low-grade stress, which we know is the main driver behind the majority of modern diseases right now. These extremely stressful breathwork practices sort of are a pressure release valve. They let you get it all out. So for the rest of the time, you're able to chill out. This is hermetic stress. It's the same thing with a cold bath. You wouldn't spend 2 hours in a cold bath unless you're Wim Hof,
crazy.
but there's no benefits to doing that. That's where you're going to start to injure yourself. But 2 minutes, 3 minutes, huge benefit of doing that. So these breathwork practices, they're a little longer than that. Some of them are 15 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes. Once you get better at this, they can go on for 90 minutes. That's
Yeah.
where things get really, really wild.
Yeah.
But that's the benefit is they allow you to release all of that stress, start again from neutral
Mm.
and get on with your day. And I think that there is incredible benefit behind doing these practices. I don't care which one you do. They all
Mm.
kind of do the same thing. And but you have to know, you have to have that foundation set. And again, don't believe me. You can look at the science and the
Right.
studies of these vigorous breathwork practices and see for yourself.
And your book is so beautifully outlines like all the research that exists around these different techniques. And so, yeah, thank you for being so, I think, rigorous and just putting that, all of that together. It was, yeah, it's really beautiful. So people can definitely look at that as a source of insight and inspiration, really. What, how often do you think one needs to practice these techniques to see benefits? Do you have any sense? Have you read anything in the literature that, gives us some parameters in terms of, when do we actually start to see benefits
It depends
and
on
markers
who
of
you are.
inflammation and,
And
anything that can be
and
measured?
yeah. So from what I see, usually in the first 30 seconds, you're seeing benefits,
Oh, I love that.
just from very, very simple
Mhm.
practices. And again, hook yourself up with every wearable, every
Yeah.
device, and see for yourself. Literally, a few focused breaths,
Mhm.
your body will start reacting to
Mhm.
that and it will start functioning differently. Both of us, we did that two
Mhm.
inhale trick. And I don't know about you, but after 10
For
seconds, I bet my blood pressure
for
decreased. I
sure.
bet
Yeah.
there was more blood flow to the brain, and
Mhm.
all of these things are measured. So it's not just about doing it for 30
Mhm.
seconds, though. It's about building better habits, and building better habits can take weeks and weeks.
Mhm.
So this is what I like about breathing as opposed to the benefits of eating, which we know we can eat better and you're going to have benefits, but you'll see those benefits a couple weeks or maybe a couple
Yes.
months later down the line, especially if you're looking at lipids or something. Like, it
Mhm.
takes a long time. With breathing, you can feel these benefits and you can see them on readouts on wearables within a few seconds. So
Yeah.
if all of that's going to happen within a few seconds, what's going to happen after a few days or
Yeah.
weeks? So it's, again, it's hard to say because different people are in different levels. I've
Mhm.
never seen anyone that has not benefited of operating more efficiently,
Mhm.
of allowing their body to restore better at
Mhm.
night. So it, again, it's what level of benefits is, but that's up to the individual.
Yeah, we saw it. There's a paper just published in Cell Press. Dr. Andrew Huberman was one of the authors on the study, and they looked at a bunch of different breathing protocols, and one of them was the cyclic sigh, and that really did emerge of all the other breathwork techniques in the study. That emerged as being the most efficacious in reducing anxiety and stress, and
Mhm.
so it was really really cool to see that just even in 5 minutes a day. Folks experienced decreases in perceived stress and decreases in perceived anxiety, and these subsisted, long after that 5 minute. To your point, it's like if you just spend
Sure.
5 minutes, you're going to feel the benefits and the effects of that technique, after it's over.
And I know that people don't want another thing to have
Yeah.
to do. Like, people are already on their supplements and, eating
Yeah.
right and working out. But this is something that you can do while you're working. It can
Hmm.
be something you can do while you commute to work in your car or whatever.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter. It's not like people think that proper breathing is you have to go to this class and do this thing for 40 minutes. You have to do it every day. That's
Hmm.
garbage. You have to become a normal breather first and foremost. So what helped me train is the sleep tape, is
Mm.
learning how to do that at night. That's a huge benefit.
Yeah.
And then when I'm in front of a computer, which is like all the time, sometimes I'll put on a little chiming sound on my phone.
Hmm.
There's a zillion different apps that can do this, that can just train you when to inhale, when to exhale, when
Mm.
to inhale, when to exhale. So it doesn't stop you from what you're already doing. And if you walk your dog every day, like I do, or if you
Hmm.
jog every day, you can incorporate, these are things, again,
Hmm.
you're already doing. So you can incorporate different breathing techniques and different practices to help make that process more efficient and enjoyable. So it's less of an ask than it is asking someone to
Hmm.
meditate for a half an hour a day every day, which 95% of the people are going to fail at doing.
Right. Right. Meditation's hard. It's like it's a really interesting skill. I found personally, I struggle with meditation, and that
Mhm.
might just be my personality type. But yeah, I mean, I find mindful meditation a little bit easier. Mindful breathing is my go-to, but yeah, meditation could be hard. And I think breathing is just a way more natural, and
Mhm.
potentially like more beneficial. And that's what we saw in the Huberman study.
But yeah, I was always not very good at meditating at
Mm,
all until I figured out how to breathe
mm,
properly.
mm,
And now it's something that I find extremely easy to do
mm,
because it starts with proper breathing.
mm,
That's where it starts. And that is sort of the door that opens up these other things that you can do with meditation. We know that the benefits of meditation are profound. No one's
totally.
going to argue with that. It's just
Yeah.
really hard for us to get all of our monkey minds into that space. But
Yeah.
once you figure out this coherent breathing,
Mm,
I tell you, meditation gets a lot easier
yeah.
because you're able to consciously control your nervous system and how your
Mm,
brain is functioning. And it allowed me to finally be able to do this as a regular practice.
that's great. Maybe I'm hard on myself. I don't know. Maybe I'm better at it than I think. But I definitely try. I would say that one of the top three reasons why folks come onto the Woo platform is they're interested in losing weight. I'd be very curious
Hmm.
to know what you've learned in terms of between the connection between breath and weight loss.
It's really hard
Mm,
because there aren't many studies that have looked at specifically breathing patterns
mm,
and weight loss. But we do know a few things.
mm,
You burn fat with oxygen. Okay. And a lot of people who are overweight are running anaerobically, especially in certain areas of their body, which makes it almost impossible to burn
mhm,
fat. So the key is to get blood flow to all of these areas and to deliver oxygen easily to these areas. And that's how you're going to burn fat. How do you do that? You have to start by breathing properly.
mm,
We know that a lot of people, once they start gaining weight, that weight can accumulate in the chest and stomach area, which does not allow them to take a proper deep breath. So many of them start breathing in and out of their
really
chest,
shallow.
uh, yeah,
Mm,
which stresses the body out.
mm,
Blood sugar spikes, cortisol
mhm,
spikes. You're not able to really get that blood flow into all of these areas. Another thing that happens is when you start breathing shallow, you start offloading too much CO2. Not just shallow, but when
mm,
you're breathing too much, you are offloading too much CO2, which causes all of those blood vessels to start to close up,
mm,
which also inhibits that blood flow, allows you to run anaerobically in these areas where you don't want to be running anaerobically. So proper breathing is, I believe, is essential for easier weight loss. And we do
mm.
know that, what is it, 8 pounds of every 10 pounds that you lose comes out through our breath. We lose weight through breathing. And a lot of people think, well, I'm just going to breathe more and then I'm going to offload more fat. That's not how it works. Sorry.
Well,
It's tied to metabolism. So that is how we lose weight, is through our breath. So by doing that more efficiently, I wish someone would,
mm,
would do a big controlled study of this. I'm convinced that it can benefit
uh-huh.
in easier weight loss.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If you're a poor breather, I mean, it's hard to know exactly the mechanism just because there's so many things at play. When you don't breathe properly, you don't sleep well. When you don't sleep well, your your hormones don't fire as they should. Your ghrelin
Mhm.
levels, your leptin levels. Like,
Mhm.
it just seems that there's just some really, I think, direct effects for sure, but probably lots of indirect effects as well that make it hard to kind of unpack. But yeah, I feel like that would be a really, really cool study to run.
What we do know, there's a bunch of studies, dozens and dozens of them, looking at people who are overweight and controlling their breathing and carbon dioxide levels. And the
Mm,
higher the CO2 levels, you can lose weight precipitously, so much faster, so much more efficiently. And you can look these up on PubMed or whatever. They call it normobaric carbon dioxide therapy. It's all of these
Wow.
crazy different names, which is something that makes it so confusing. But it's great for diabetics, and it's
Mm.
fantastic for weight loss. That's something you likely have to do in a lab because they're messing up
Mm.
with the amounts of oxygen and CO2 that you are inhaling. Nonetheless, there's a lot you can do not being in a lab.
Mhm.
That is breathing in and out of your nose. That is getting that CO2 level up to a healthy state where you can allow for that proper blood flow.
Amazing, amazing. So, what did I forget? Like, is there a kind of an area that you feel like is just so important for people to be aware of that maybe we haven't covered?
I just think that a lot of this stuff may sound really kooky. It sounded pretty crazy to me
Mm.
until I spent so many years in this field. And when you start to look at different Olympians,
Mm.
this used to be like this little secret that they wouldn't tell their competitors about, it is breath training.
Mhm.
But you look at all these Olympic teams that have adopted proper breathing or sometimes crazy breathing practices,
Mhm.
and their performance just goes through the roof.
Mm.
And this is all recorded stuff. So what we're talking about here, it's not some placebo effect, obviously, but it's an essential part of our biology. Like, what we're talking about here is how our bodies work, and to allow your body to work better is going to allow it to perform better, whether that's losing weight more efficiently or whether that's jogging a marathon. So
Mm.
to me, even though it sounds nuts, at the core of it, at the foundation of it, it makes perfect sense.
Mm.
And don't listen to us. Go try it for yourself. See how it works out.
Nice. Would you say, so for the folks who are really skeptical out there, what would be the three kind of
Hmm.
nuggets that you would like if you're trying to kind of you just there's a gun pointed at your head, you had to sell this idea of like nasal
Hmm.
breathing, what would be your kind of top three things that you would mention?
So if you have high blood pressure,
Hmm.
go in, take your blood pressure, and then breathe for 2 minutes at that 5 to 6 second rate. 5 to 6 seconds in, 5 to 6 seconds out. You just close your eyes and breathe. Don't push it. We tend to very lightly. No one should be able to see you breathing. Breathe deep down into your belly. After a couple minutes doing that, you can take your blood pressure and see how that works for you. You can look at your heart rate variability while you are doing this.
Hmm.
Okay. So again, don't believe us, believe your own body,
Hmm.
believe the own data that you are collecting.
Hmm.
Beyond that, you can see if you're a mouth breather at night. There are different apps you can use. Snore Lab is one.
Right.
No, I'm not being paid by them. They have a free version of it, and it allows you to record all the snoring
Mm.
and choking that you're doing. It's available for everyone. It's not an official sleep study, but it's a good general gauge. And then try to close your mouth at night and collect your sleep data and see what changes for you. So that's the second thing I would do. And the third thing I would do is you can adopt these different practices, the cyclical sigh, the
Hmm.
physiological sigh, whatever you want to
Hmm.
call it. You can try some breath work that's available for free
Hmm.
and just see how you feel, because that matters too. I know everyone's all stuck on data and numbers, but it ultimately comes down to how is your body operating? How do you feel?
Hmm.
And you can start with that. And if you like what you're seeing, you can go further into it and see what it can do for you. So I want to be very clear. I can't stand the idea that I'm actually offering prescriptions to people because I'm a journalist here. Like, I want to give you a choice on what to do, but I
Wow.
don't care what you do. I'm not going to follow up on you. This is up to you. And if you want to ignore all this information, it's perfectly fine for me. I just want to offer people some choices and
Mhm.
ways of them to possibly improve their sleep, their athletic performance, and their anxiety levels.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been so fun chatting. Where is the best place for folks to find you and all the good work that you do?
So my publisher allowed me to put all 500 or so studies up on my website because we knew that people were going to be very
Wow.
skeptical about this. So that's available for free. There are pictures there. There's some graphs there. I'm not collecting email addresses. There's no paywall. You can just go to Mr. James Nestor, mrjamesnestor.com. You can see the bibliography there. I also went and interviewed a bunch of experts in the field, some people from Stanford, people from Harvard. You don't believe me, you might want to believe them. There are interviews available for free there and some breathing exercises. I also have an Instagram thing, but my God, that social media stuff is a lot of work. So I'm extremely lazy at it. But there's some stuff I did in the last couple years that might be of interest. That's right along these lines.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And we'll link to all that in the show notes. And and just thank you again for putting all of this out into the world.
Big thanks to James Nestor for coming on the show. Check out the book Breath and his insights on the power of breath work. If you enjoyed this episode of the Whoop Podcast, please leave a rating or review. Please subscribe to the Whoop Podcast. Check us out on social at Whoop, at Will Ahmed. If you have a question you want us to answer on the podcast, email us podcast@whoop.com. Call us 508-443-4952. New members can use the code WILL, get a $60 credit on Whoop accessories. Alternatively, new members can sign up for a free trial. So check that out. That's whoop.com. And that's a wrap for the week. Thank you all for listening. We will catch you next week on the Whoop Podcast. As always, stay healthy and stay in the green.